Closet, a Todd Mills mystery. Book 1. Author R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher Scribble Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 37. Oh, crap, muttered Janice as she sat in the dark vehicle. Crap, crap, crap. She opened the door and climbed out. Standing on the tips of her toes, she tried to see over the bushes. Just what in the hell was going on down there in the big house? While there were a few lights on, she couldn't make out any movement or even the faintest sound of life. Where in God's name had Todd gone, and what kind of trouble was he in now? 15 minutes was nearly up, so what was she supposed to do? Go ahead and call the number, or go right on up to the house and find out what was going on. Come on, Todd, she said to herself. Give me a signal. Let me know you're okay. Todd had nothing, no weapon of any kind. Still, he knew that he had to gain entry to the house. Perhaps Jeff was merely knocked out. On the other hand, perhaps he lay dying. He couldn't stop himself. Inside the house was the nugget of truth. The reason why Michael had been killed and Todd's own life thrown into such disarray. If only he could get a closer glimpse at the papers Rawlings had been sorting through in the dining room, it might reveal the true nature of what Rawlings and Jeff were involved in. As the tension rushed through his body, however, Todd knew he wanted much more than to simply find out what this was all about. Edging up to the front door, he hesitated, then stared at the large window to the right. He moved closer, but the curtain was thick, and he couldn't see through, so he turned back, making it to the front door, reaching for the old brass handle. He turned it, found that it gave easily, and pushed. It was the first of two doors, however, and he entered a tiny chamber that was meant as a stopgap to the cold Minnesota winds. Todd gently closed the door behind him, stood still on the tiled floor. Then he moved up to the next door, which was made of thick oak and had a large curtained window set into it. Looking through the thin window covering, he could make out the lights of both the living room and dining room. But there was no sign of Rawlings. Was he still in the living room? Had he slipped back into the kitchen? He turned the doorknob and, to his surprise and relief, felt it click open, easily. Pushing it open a crack, Todd slipped quickly inside. He closed the door and was standing in the front hall, his heart thumping along, every one of his senses keenly piqued. To his left, the Victorian fireplace, a gas affair surrounded with a heavy mantel and extensive woodwork. Next to it, a dark wooden staircase with an ornate balustrade that rose up to the second floor. A dark hall right in front of him. That might lead to the rear stairs or a back door in the living room on his right. For maybe 30 seconds, Todd stood completely motionless, listening for any sound of Rawlings. He moved several feet forward and glanced into the living room, and then into the very edge of the dining room. An assortment of papers was still spread across the table, a calculator. The papers on the table were bank statements, active ones, by the long list of numbers. Todd slipped forward, moving out of the dark entry and through a corner of the living room. He paused at a large round column that marked the passage into the dining room. If only Rawlings were seated right there, his back to him. He heard something, movement of some sort, perhaps from the kitchen. Quickly, he pulled back, slipping out of the dining room, back into the dark entry hall. He pressed himself against a wall, heard nothing else. It would be foolish to try to make it through the dining room, which was so open and well lit, and he turned. Yes, this other hall, the dark one, had to lead to the rear of the house. Surely it connected to the kitchen. Perhaps he could sneak up on Rawlings from this side. As Todd entered the passage, a board moaned under his right foot. He froze. Fortunately, the music was loud enough to have drowned out the sound of his step. He moved forward again, carefully avoiding that particular floorboard, and soon the basement stairs loomed to his left. Pressing on, he came to a corner, saw yet another door, this one partially open. Light poured through the crack. The sound of a kettle rattling and steaming. He edged toward it. Were those steps he heard? Was Rawlings right there in the kitchen? With surprise as his only advantage, he paused and calculated every movement. He moved to the open doorway toward the light. There was a refrigerator, the sink, several mugs on the counter, and the kettle, heaving with steam. Yes, and the other hallway, the rear one that led to the back door. That was where Jeff now lay, either unconscious or dead. Todd's eyes returned to the counter, a wooden knife holder set near the stove. Todd just needed to rush over there, grab one of the large knives, a weapon. He pulled back the door a bit, peered into the room. Still, no sign of Rawlings. He could make it if he rushed, he thought. But just as he was nudging back the door, he heard the sound of someone clearing his throat behind him. Todd spun around to see a dark figure standing in the lightless hallway, aiming a gun at Todd. The man couldn't stop himself from laughing. "Surprise, surprise," whispered a hoarse voice. Acting on reflex, Todd turned and dove through the door into the bright kitchen. He desperately felt along the wall, hit a switch that blackened the lights, and dove to the floor, which probably saved his life. A second later, there was a gunshot, and a bullet went whizzing somewhere over him, passing out the kitchen window with a clean, hard noise. On his hands and knees, Todd slid across the floor and then clambered around the corner of the stove. "Good try, sport," called the voice from the doorway of the kitchen. Come out, wherever you are." As the tea kettle continued to scream on the large gas flame, Todd's mind scrambled for his next move. His hand sensed something on the floor, and in the faint light he saw a dropped spoon with shaking fingers. He picked it up, then hurled it toward the other side of the room, where it hit the counter with a distinct clatter. The other man leaped from the doorway and fired twice. Todd sprang up, grabbed the boiling teapot from the stove top, and hurled it at his assailant, who screamed as the scorching pot smashed into his shoulder. Todd then dove to a counter and groped for a thick meat cleaver, which he took from the knife block. But when he turned back, he saw the gun whirling in his direction. Todd hurled himself toward another doorway as a bullet ricocheted off the refrigerator, then another appliance, and finally into a wall. Rushing frantically, Todd tore past the back door where he tripped over a bag of charcoal. He stumbled, nearly fell, and his left foot landed squarely on a plastic container of lighter fluid, which burst, spraying its contents across the back hall and down the basement stairs. Todd scrambled through the slick puddle, jumping over Jeff's lifeless body as steps rushed in from behind. Todd shoved on, reaching another door which he yanked open. Suddenly he found himself in a dark bathroom, a long, narrow space with a toilet and a huge old clawfoot tub. Meat cleaver in hand, he slammed the door shut behind himself and fumbled unsuccessfully with the lock. "Oh, you're dead now," called the voice racing after him like a ghost. "No mercy for me. I'm going to make sure this hurts." Todd spun around and raced blindly through the small room. At the other end was yet another door, a line of light seeping beneath it and up one side. That had to be the dining room. As he groped in the dark for the knob, however, he hit something soft, yet firm. A shoulder. In response, a flaccid hand flopped across Todd's leg, and he jumped back in fright. A body crumpled into him, and Todd grabbed it as it fell to the floor. He knew it wasn't Jeff, and as Todd fumbled to catch the body, his hands ran awkwardly through short, thick hair, then lumbered over a broad, muscular back. A familiar scent hit his nose. "Shit!" muttered Todd. The door behind him was kicked open, and a dark figure said, "Don't worry, your pal's not dead yet." A light switched on in his arms. Todd held Steve Rawlings, a line of blood curling around the back of his neck. "But he will be soon," continued the man from the doorway. "You're going to shoot him with this gun." And then Todd turned around, saw Michael's brother-in-law standing there, the pistol aimed at him, and gasped. "Rick!" "Then I'm going to kill you," smiled the balding man. "And everyone will assume you killed the others too. Won't that be a tidy ending to it all?" Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label. but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.